gold, white, blue, and green. The red represents physical disabilities, the gold represents neurodiversity, white is invisible disabilities and undiagnosed disabilities. Blue is emotional and psychiatric disabilities, and green is sensory disabilities. The faded black background represents mourning and rage for the victims of ableist violence and abuse, and the diagonal band cuts across the walls and the barriers that separate the disabled from normal society, also representing light and creativity cutting through the darkness. There it goes. All right. So if you're not familiar, accessibility is when everybody can use your website. They can obtain the same information, perform the same actions independently. A common abbreviation that you will hear or see is A11Y, pronounced as ally, and it's a numeronym, meaning that there are 11 characters between the A and the Y. Other numeronyms are like I18N, internationalization. And quick primer, what are disabilities? A mismatch of human interaction with your environment. So a disability happens at the points of interaction between a person and society. Physical, cognitive, and social exclusion is a result of mismatched interactions. And this here is the persona spectrum from the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit. It's used to understand related mismatches and motivations across a spectrum of permanent, temporary, and situational scenarios. Quick tool to show how a solution can scale to a broader audience and foster empathy. So start off with touch disabilities. It shows permanent as having one arm, a temporary disability when you have an arm injury, a situational disability if you're a new parent holding a baby. For sight disabilities, a permanent one would be blind. A temporary disability can be cataracts, situational, distracted driver. Hearing disabilities has deaf as a permanent disability, an ear infection as a temporary one, and it shows a bartender in a loud environment for a situational disability. For speech disabilities, a permanent example would be nonverbal. Temporary, you have laryngitis and lose your voice. And situational, a heavy accent. So hopefully these can kind of showcase that disability is something that everybody will experience at some point in time, especially taking into account situational and temporary disability. And who does accessibility impact? As I said, everyone. Over 1 billion people have disabilities, an estimated 1.3, that's about 16% or 1 in 6. Largest minority group in the world, anyone can join at any time. And the graphic here shows a few categories: vision, hearing, neurodiversity, physical health, learning, mobility, and mental health. And then it also says that 386 million working age people worldwide have a disability. People with disabilities are an emerging market the size of China. And why does accessibility matter? Why do we do this? So one aspect here is better designs for everyone. So solve for one and extend to many. So shown on the screen, I first have an OXO Good Grips vegetable peeler. Does anyone know the story behind this company? The creator of OXO Good Grips was realizing that his wife struggled with holding a vegetable peeler because she had arthritis and all of the current products hurt to use and were ineffective. So he made a bunch of prototypes and found that the thick silicone grip with the fins was comfortable for her. And that company has grown a lot. They have a lot of products. I do not have arthritis. I like using their products. They're comfortable. In the middle, I have a screen capture of a Gilmore Girls clip with captions, because captions benefit folks that are deaf or hard of hearing. And shown here, I love captions. I feel like I can't hear without my captions on. So that's an example of benefiting more people than the intended audience. There's one of my links here has something about like the majority of college students find captions helpful in presentations. And at the top right is the classic accessibility example of a sidewalk curb cut. Folks heard of the curb cut phenomenon? All right. So curb cuts, there's a lot of history around that. Short way to explain it would be after World War II, a lot of disabled veterans came back home and could not navigate sidewalks. And so started pushing for curb cuts, so the little slopes at the corners, so that they could get up sidewalks. And this benefits a lot of people, parents with strollers, suitcases, injuries, crutches, everything. And it's become it's called a curb cut effect. When something is designed for people with disabilities and benefits everyone. Also, there are legal considerations. So quick primer on the legal aspects in the US. We have the Americans with Disabilities Act and prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. And this has 5 titles, not right. And Title I, employment, Title II, state and local government activities, public transportation, public accommodations, Title III, telecommunications, Title IV. So when accessibility lawsuits come up under the ADA, they're generally going to be under Title II for state and local government or Title III, public accommodations. Large cases, the Domino's case in what was it, 2019? Yes. Where somebody complained that they couldn't use the Domino's mobile app to order a pizza, and Domino's said, but you can order by the telephone. That's the same thing. What are you talking about? They lost. And one of the outcomes of that was, is a digital website, is that covered under a public accommodation? Because Domino's has brick and mortar stores, it's a public company, and that, as far as I know currently, varies on different circuits courts on the opinions of if the company has to have a physical brick and mortar location to be held accountable to Title III of ADA. Exciting news, April 2024, this year, Title II of the ADA now directly mentions the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines as a requirement for the ADA. Public accommodations still pending. And then we also have the Section 504 Rehab Act for recipients of federal funding, Section 508 for technology sold to federal agencies, state non-discrimination laws for public accommodations. Pretty sure California has some stricter laws. They also, the past year or two, had proposed a Digital Accessibility Act that had some flaws, and it didn't end up passing. And it'll come back. Yeah, so but hopefully when it comes back, it's in a better state. Because one of the problems was that it was requiring a compliance status, and it had very unclear guidelines for how to meet that. And once you start looking at accessibility guidelines, really getting into nitty-gritty examples, accessibility experts will disagree on if something does or does not fail a requirement. So it gets very tricky. And then we also have the Air Carrier Access Act for primary websites of airline carriers to conform to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And the Affordable Care Act also has accessibility requirements for help. And I when I show the slides, there's going to be some resource links if you want to hear about some more of these lawsuits. There's currently primarily websites are targeted with accessibility lawsuits. They're easier to test and get going. And e-commerce sites are the main category of lawsuits right now. So that's about 80% of lawsuits are for e-commerce websites. And there's also, in the past few years, been an uptick in companies that use accessibility widgets and overlays still getting sued. And we're going to be talking about accessibility widgets and overlays more throughout this. But all those things aside, yes, there are legal aspects. That's not why we do it. We do accessibility because it's the right thing to do to include everybody, and it's a user experience imperative. It is not just because of a legal bare minimum requirement. So when and where do we do this? I have a picture up here of a section of keyboard keys with a left arrow and a shift key. And I have the text reads shift left for issue prevention. That's a big accessibility industry phrase, shifting left. And I've gotten used to saying it, but it really means trying to have accessibility in mind at the beginning of a project and handling it at the earliest possible phase, because it will be cheaper and easier to fix sooner it's found. So shifting left is shifting left in the project life cycle. So instead of finding your accessibility bugs in production, it's taking it to account in the design phase. And I have on the right some sections to be looking at for accessibility that applies everywhere. So in your UX design, in your code, and in your content on the website. And that it's also everyone's responsibility. So everybody on a project team can impact accessibility. Designers, content developers, software engineers, QA, project managers, business, leadership. Because especially if you have only one or two people pushing for accessibility, it's very difficult, and leadership and business support is critical for success. And I have mentioned in passing, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So this is how we can implement accessibility. These are our worldwide accepted guidelines for success, and we'll evaluate your website based off these. And it was created by the Worldwide Web Consortium, the W3C. And on the right, I have a screenshot of the Web Accessibility Initiative logo with some icons representing different forms of disabilities. All right, so now I will show an example of a very confirmed inaccessible website. And we're going to take a look and see what we find. We'll just do the regular zoom in there. Does anyone notice anything about this website? Have any ideas on what might make a website inaccessible? Yeah.
It's hard to read the text over the image.
Yes. There are
font on the tabs is what you like on the white background.
There are 22 problems. So I have other ideas of what's wrong, or like how do I find the problem?
Not everyone can see it, but fine.
Yeah, I don't.
And it doesn't look like did your cursor default to a field when you load the page? Well,
Looks like the security test doesn't have audio.
Yep. We've got a table here, got a video. What are some things that could go wrong with videos? No captions. All right, and now I'm just going to pop over to they very nicely gave us an example of this website with the accessibility barriers remediated.
Maybe before you do that,
Okay.
one other thing. When you're looking at a site like this, one of the first things you can do is try and navigate the whole site using your keyboard
Yes.
and see what happens, right? Are you able to actually access all the controls simply using, so you should be able to use, tab to go from one actionable control to another, and then enter space, depending on the type of control to activate it.
Yes.
And if it doesn't do that, it's so like a lot of times carousels like that might not have, might not be included in the sequence for keyboard control. But that's just that's one good thing, easy thing that people can use to check.
Yeah.
On a site like this.
So let's do that. I'm pressing the tab key here. I honestly don't know what's happening because it looks like there's two things that are kind of.
Well, you're in you do have focus. Okay, so now you activated the tab. Now can you use arrow keys to go down? Nope.
Sure cannot.
See,
I'm
so-
scrolling the page. Oh,
So, well, but that's
My
because it
cursor.
scrolled past your mouse.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
So
there you can
this-
see that one worked, but the first tab, the arrow key didn't work.
I'm
to
using
control.
tab.
Oh, you're using tab.
I am not,
Oh, you
I'm
weren't using-
curious if going down tab.
okay, all right.
does.
So.
And let's see, so I'm tabbing what do y'all think of the contrast of with
Oh,
the active one?
Terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna zoom past this. Oh,
So we completely skipped the. We completely skipped the.
okay, yeah,
Okay, so
now
we
we're
do have-
in the video.
We do have keyboard control of the video player controls.
Oh, at least a little bit. I'm just doing
Yeah.
simple tab, shift tab to
Yeah.
see if everything's reachable. Okay. Now
And
after
now
we
you're
went
in
to
the
the
form.
video, we're in the form. But that should not have happened. Focus order, keyboard order should match the visual order.
Right.
And again, the active indicator is very interesting to see.
Right. Hard to see where
And
the focus is.
yeah, and I couldn't see focus there.
Did it completely skip those checkboxes? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay,
now
so
I'm on
that's-
some links at the bottom. Oh, and I've wrapped around the
Now
top.
you're after. Well, anyway.
Any other checks that people want to see on this?
Can you type into those text boxes?
Yeah, some of the cheat and use my mouse to get there. Name. At least I can type. And I can get to the checkboxes. It's just you can't tell that you are on them. So I'm pressing
Oh, you
space
just couldn't see the
and I
focus.
can
Okay.
activate them using space bar.
But
Any
there's
other-
no focus stayed on the checkbox.
Nope.
Right.
Any other ideas for what we should look at here?
Those arrows work on the photo?
They were not tabbable.
Yeah.
But with my mouse, I bet they do. Yes. And then it has these dot navs here. Those were also not keyboard navigable, but under, yes, they're clickable. That was a choice.
That's
All right, now,
The good thing, typos on a picture, so you can't read it, right?
oh yeah.
Two wrongs make a right.
So now this is a remediated version of this site. First glance, any ideas, what could be, what was done and how they fix things?
On the application, I guess there was a color discrepancy. So now they switched it to where they labeled it with a star instead of saying, look for the blue color.
Yes, so they have a clear visual requirement that the fields are required. I'm also going to assume and hope that they have the required attributes on the actual components in the code. Any other things that notice or what could have been done?
The background on the title of the picture.
Yes, that is now readable.
The tabs on the or the categories give a clear indication that there's more information.
Yes.
I'm imagining that's probably indicating that it has more action to it that you can navigate better.
Different little scroll. This table, I think, might look a little bit different also. And our video has a very large play button, and it looks like it has more controls involved. So there's probably captioning on that one now.
As well as audio description.
Good. All right. So now I'll do the same keyboard test that we did here.
Can you try the drop down?
Yeah.
Quick, just to show, see what they're.
So I'm up on the top right of this, and I've got clearer focus indication, and it's showing the selected tab and the like current tab. So now this is what keyboard focus looks like. Everything's readable. I can press space. I can use the arrow keys, so I'm not relying on tab keys, but tab does work here.
Much better selected state or focus state.
Yeah.
of the dark purple.
Press space. And also press enter. Yeah, so I'm able to navigate the buttons the way that they should be. That's very exciting. Oh, wow. Look at this. I can use the paddle nav using keyboard. And let's see. I also can now get to the dot nav with keyboard. The dot nav also has visible numbered labels now. Oh. Interesting. So they still have the form after everything else, which I would disagree with their choice on that one. So here's the form, but now I do have a clearer focus indication, especially on these checkboxes. So that's a good improvement. Now, another fun thing that we didn't do is a scan. So using some automated testing. Okay, so I pulled up Axe Dev Tools. It's a free browser extension. I'm gonna do a full page scan of this remediated page. It found 0 issues. Yay! As I noted, I would probably raise the form focus order being not matching the visual order. I'd probably raise that as an issue. That's not something that automated testing would catch. Well, if you pay for this, you can, but the free version doesn't. And if I do the same scan on this, does anyone want to guess the number of issues that the scan will find on this?
Pretty sure you said 22.
Other?
Bigger.
And I've done that before and I found like 55. And the reason this count differs is that it's counting every single instance of the failures. And so from automated testing, it caught 8 different types of issues. And so that is 8 of the 22 that the web developers for this page identified. So as you can see, automated testing will catch some things, not everything. You can't fully rely on that. Are there questions about these websites?
It says alternate text. So on the good version, if you hover over the image, does it
Yeah.
show all the alternate text?
So hovering over an image will show the title attribute of an image, but I am using a MacBook, so I have a more fun thing at my disposal called hover text, and so I'm using the command key and I can see yes. An old brick building is covered in ivy is the alt text for that image, but if I go back to the bad side, go to the same image. Forward. Oh, there's not the same image.
Okay.
All right. But anyways, I'll do the same hover text. And this one has alt text of -slide1.jpg. So that's not very helpful. Okay, so we just saw an example of a bad website and a good website. This here, I have a list of warning signs in your code. So I have on the left a list of HTML things, and on the right a list of CSS things. This is a short list just of things that I find simply looking at code, not even bringing up the website. Just I close the repo and I see these things in code. I'm like, that's something I want to look at because it could be bad. So the first HTML is when you have image tags missing alt text. And sometimes when you're using like a content management system and you have, say, like an image component, and maybe you have alt equals blank set like hard coded, that also could be a similar warning sign, because then that means that any image data that's passed to that particular component will never receive the alt text. I found this at work many times. And so, yes, alt equals blank can be fantastic when it is a decorative image. It does not need alt text. But if you're doing that to a reusable component, you may not know what image will be there, and you may need alt text. So just another call out there. Anchor tags, so links missing their href values. If they don't have an href value, you will not be able to tab to it at all. Another thing that gives me the ick is when I see click handlers added to non-interactive elements. So if I have something like a span or a div element or a paragraph, and I see that an on-click handler was added, immediately like, why was that necessary? Because ideally you would be using semantic HTML, and you use whatever you need it to be. You could use a button or a link if you want it to behave like a button or a link. Similarly, a mismatch of buttons and links. So this I would see all the time in client code where they would have like links that would be styled as buttons, and the link would actually open something in the same page, or a button that opened a link, and things get a little messy. But general rule of thumb, a button should be used for an in-page action. A link should be used when it's opening a new page, or like an anchor link to a different section of the page. And definitely do not want to have your buttons and links nested. I've seen that a lot when people will try to implement a design to make a link look like a button or a button look like a link. Design-wise, I really don't like when designers choose to make links look like buttons and vice versa, because if it's supposed to be a button, make it look like a button. But technically, it's not a failure if it just looks that way and it operates as expected. It's just my personal pet peeve. Input elements. If there's no visible label and the only visible label is a placeholder attribute, placeholder attributes will disappear once text is inputted. So if you lose that information, you may not know, wait, what was I supposed to put here? Inputs without autocomplete values. So this one, autocomplete values are for identifying input purposes in form fields, and it's a WCAG requirement, and there's a list of like 30 values. So not every single input that you use will have an appropriate value, but if you are setting up a form and it's got date of birth, an address, a credit card, a postal code, a name, a phone number, all of those are standard form fields that do have autocomplete values, and this will help assistive technology identify what the field is for and make things easier to autofill. We love that. And then another thing is if I'm looking at the code for a page and I don't see a heading anywhere, there's nowhere. There's only divs, spans, paragraph tags. They have a lot of content and there's no headings. That means there's more than likely no hierarchical structure present, at least in the code. Maybe visually they did. And CSS, a few things over here. Outline none. So this will give warning bells for potentially that the focus indicator on an interactive element was removed. So like the first slide we looked at when we would tab to the checkboxes, none of us could tell that those were in the tab order because they probably removed the focus outline. List style none, this is a specific voiceoverism. So voiceover, the WebKit team is very adamant that if a designer chose to remove the list style, that it probably wasn't meant to be a list. But often the list style is removed just because, oh, it looks pretty, or like they're putting in a separate, like custom, like bullet indicator situation. But when you add list style none, VoiceOver will remove the semantic role of list. So on iOS or Mac, VoiceOver ignores it. It doesn't know it's a list. Text decoration none. This can vary based on design systems, but generally, text decoration none would be an example, would be like a link, and you add that. It means it's no longer underlined. That would be the default state. I'm pro underline links because that allows the link to be identified as interactive without relying on color alone. Animations without prefers reduced motion. So computers and operating systems, phones, they will let users choose to reduce motion on their device. And you can apply that to your websites. It's one of my favorite features. A recent thing that I realized that I would never have thought about, but flex direction. When you're using row reverse or column reverse to just make the layout appear how you want it to, just so everything will look pretty, match the design specs, that will impact the reading order of assistive technology because you reversed it. Now the visual order does not match the order in the DOM. And then another thing would be pointer events none. So this specifically will break hover text on Mac. And that was where I showed the command and the text enlarged underneath. So when that is there, it will block hover text from enlarging the text. And I have a little demo of all of these things here. All right. So first, I've got an image. There is no alt. And so that's this guy right there. And I also have a div where I gave it class heading 1. And I applied the default heading styles, but it's not truly a heading. And then I've got some buttons here. I've got an anchor link that I overwrote to have a row of button, and there's no href. And then I've got a div button that has a click handler. I have a true button, so button, type button, and then I've got a button with a row of link added. And so when this happens, like generally there would be an on-click handler to like use the JavaScript to load an href dynamically, but I don't have that right there. I have an input field. There's no label associated. There's only a placeholder value. I've got another fake heading as a div. I have an unordered list with some list items. And then I have a box down there. Okay. So in the CSS, got my heading stuff, take some button styles. Text decoration none is on the buttons, so that's why this anchor button is not underlined. On hover and focus, I removed the outlines, so there's not a visible focus outline. Got headings, and then on the unordered list, I removed the list style, so that's why there's no bullets there. But visually, we have the benefit of seeing that this is still a list. And then I have this box thing, and I gave it a transition. And I have a JavaScript over here to handle a click on the div button. to do some animation. So the box is growing in size, and it changed color. This is a pretty minor example of animation. I just took it from the Indian docs. And now I'll turn voiceover on to kind of go over some of the impact of these choices.
VoiceOver on Safari, DEVSA, window, CSS code editor, edit text, and keyboard focus. Photo 1,635,783,300,360,41,98,89.
That's so good. Y'all know exactly what that means, right?
Photo 1,600,000, hello world.
Don't know what that.
An anchor button.
And now since I used row reverse, it's in the opposite order.
I'm a div button, clickable.
And okay, I hit enter, but it didn't do anything because I am not handling the keyboard events. So that's one of the problems of using divs and adding click handlers, not accounting for all of the ways that need to be used.
I'm a button.
And I'm sorry, I'm also navigating not by tab keys. I'm using voiceover navigation. So I'm just like I'm reading the page. I'm using my left and right arrow keys to navigate. And in this case, I'm using my right arrow key, theoretically moving forward through the page. And this example, going backwards.
Link, I'm a button link.
And now I'm going to go
I'm a button,
backwards.
I'm a div button, I'm an anchor button.
And
Hello world.
all right, I'm going to press my tab key and let's just see what gets focused.
Link, I'm a button link.
Cool.
Email edit text, blend.
That was the only button there that was working was the I'm a button link, which now I'm actually quite well.
Link, I'm a button.
Oh, there it goes. There it goes. I was like, that should have been in that order. All right. But these
Leaving code
two,
preview, close that button.
yes, these two are not. The I'm a div button, I'm an anchor button are not. The anchor button has no href, and the div does not have tab index of 0 to bring it into the tab order. So when you choose not to use semantic HTML, there's a lot of extra work you have to do to make it accessible. And it's just a lot better to use the true elements that you need. All right.
Code and preview, for comfortable email export, menu pop-up button.
I'm gonna cheat.
Email.
So email. Cool. No.
Link, I'm a button, email edit text, blend.
Email
Closing
edit
menus, email edit text, blend.
All right. And
K.
oh good, it does automatically seem to know some things because this is my computer and I think Safari is doing me some favors. But I do not have any of the attributes here. So this is an email field. There's a specific type attribute for email. So I should have input type equals email, autocomplete equals email. And Safari's being nice to me. And then there also is no visible label. Now that I've put a letter, what if I forgot what I was doing? That's a very real problem.
Closing menu, 4 buttons. Entering code and preview frame. Keep assisted technology examples.
And now we're going to be visually, we can see this is a list and I'm just going to navigate through this.
Screen reader, captions, text to speech, augmented and alternative voice control.
At no point were we told that that was a list or how many items were in the list. And then I don't,
Voice control.
I was like, I don't think I added anything to the box demonstration there. That was just to show a case of first reduced motion not activating. So I keep that on all the time. So there. And then later, if we have time, I can go through and show how to fix these things.
I was wondering, what is the name of this tool that you're using right now? Is it just coming through your computer?
The screen reader? Yeah, this is VoiceOver. It's built in with every Apple product.
They're like, did Microsoft do some things similar?
They have
Yes.
one called,
The Microsoft free version is called, or free tool is Narrator. And then there's also JAWS is a really popular one. It's paid. And then there's NVDA, non-visual desktop access. That one is free. Both of those are very popular. iOS VoiceOver is like one of the largest used screen readers. And then I think NVDA is #1. right now. NVDA and JAWS have been kind of
They're very close.
back and forth as far as.
But both of those only work on the Windows platform.
Yeah.
So that's why VoiceOver is so popular on the Mac
Yes.
side. Like, it's kind of the only game in town.
I'm a Mac.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I, after this, would be happy to show some demos. I do not rely on a screen reader for everyday life. So I am not the best example, but I can definitely show you some use cases and how things work. And yeah, it's all on your phones too. Androids and iOS both have built-in screen readers.
Androids is called Talkback.
Yeah.
Voiceover on.
Okay. All right. So another fun thing I mentioned over and over using semantic HTML. A lot of the time you're not building your own components. Hopefully you're going to be using a design system or a component library. So I have some listed here that I like to refer to. I have the US Web Design System, IBM Carbon Design System, Fluent Design System for Microsoft, Adobe React Aria is a component library, and DQ Cauldron is a component library. I do not have Material UI on here. That was intentional. Material, there are several blog posts you can go find about the accessibility problems with their design system. I've run into that at work before, and we wrote our own components instead. And the design system is a full suite of how to implement the components. It'll have ideally accessibility guidance. It'll have colors, it'll have typography, everything that you need to build a website. It's all defined in there. A component library is just the components. Sometimes they'll have accessibility guidance, expected keyword behavior, but they're not going to show the full typography and swatches, color schemes of that. And these support multiple different frameworks. There's vanilla JavaScript, there's web components, there's React, Angular. You should be able to find something that works with your code base. And I have some of these up here later. And tools. So I showed, I'll start with the testing category. Axe Dev Tools, that was the automated browser scan that we ran. Another one is called Andy. It's actually from the Social Security Administration. And that stands for Accessible Name and Description Inspector. And that one is useful for identifying headings, focus order. You can resize your viewport really easily. There's a text spacing bookmarklet I have here because that's a specific WCAG guideline. And then there are 3 other browser extensions similar to Axe. I'd say Axe is the industry standard, but some of these others are also pretty cool to check out. They have some different features. IBM Equal Access Checker, Wave, don't remember, Web Accessibility Evaluation, something like that is what it stands for. And Silktide. Silktide was made by developers for developers, a pretty extensive suite of things. And design. So Stark is one of the most popular accessibility tools for designers. It can be integrated into your browser, into CI/CD tools, but also Figma and Sketch, all of whatever you're using to design. It can help you add annotations to your design. And then I have a color contrast analyzer. This is my favorite color contrast one because it's a standalone desktop app. So right here. So that means that I can use my eyedropper for the foreground and background and pick no matter where it is on a site. Obviously, this example I did here of white on white is a very poor contrast. And then it'll tell you if it passes And if you're curious why it was failing for like regular versus large, it will explain what regular and large text means. In the background here, I have Figma, and this is an example of a short little form that I added accessibility annotations to using Start. So if I had alt text, I could put alt text notes. I could, if the focus order, if I thought it was confusing, I would have done this, or if it was, I was handing off a design to a developer that was just brand new, not familiar with accessibility, or their first time doing front end web dev, I might notate the focus order. If it's pretty straightforward, I normally will leave that. And then I added notes on my fields that had the input purpose. So I gave the annotation directly to the developer to make sure it's implemented correctly with the autocomplete value and the, like for the case of email, the type. I also gave some notes on heading structure, form groups, field set, and what the expected legend should be. And I can add notes on landmarks here too. They have a lot more features, color contrast. You can add a scanning, so it'll watch, like if somebody makes updates to the design file and it introduces a problem, you'll get an alert. That's pretty neat. And then development-wise, Axe has a free accessibility linter that you can install in VS Code. So that'll catch some of the low-hanging fruit, like image without alt text is easy one of those. JSX Ally also you can set up with ESLint to do linting at the earliest stage. So these examples of design and development are part of how you shift left. Design, checking things, and then code linting is the earliest that you can start catching things. And we also have Axe Core is an API that you can implement to run automated test scans in your pipelines. And I've got a link on how to get started with automated accessibility testing. But as I mentioned, automated testing, it's not going to get you that far. It's helpful. It's better than nothing, but it's going to catch 40 to 60% of the issues. So shown here, I have a screenshot of the DEVSA website with the voiceover rotor up. So all screen readers, at least for computers, will have like voiceover calls it a rotor, but others will call it like a list. And you're able to bring up lists of headings, buttons, links, images. And so you can view all of those on the page at once. And it's really helpful to get an overview of, for headings, like the hierarchy of your page, for images, buttons, links, to see if those make sense out of context. And on the right, I have a text zoom shown on the DEVSA website. On the bottom right, I have a screenshot of an iPhone with divided into sections that has numbers on it so that it can be used for voice control. To the left of that image, I have a switch control that has a large square left and right button. So those can be used for navigation, everything. And then on the bottom left, I have an example of hover text also on the DEVSA website. And I will show some of these. We're almost there. I've just got resources and then a little get involved. But I want to go back to the overview or overlay topic. So the Six Flags website has an accessibility overlay from Accessibility. And there's several options here. I have ADHD. I'm going to turn on their ADHD friendly profile and see how that goes for me. All right. So now what they think that I need is to dim, I don't know, 75% of the screen and follow my cursor around to only have livable brightness wherever the width of my cursor is. Personally, for me, that's very distracting. I do not like that. It does not help me at all. I'm going to turn that off. Okay, yeah, I have cognitive disabilities. Let's turn that on. And it decided to add a bunch of outlines to buttons and things and underlines that I also find distracting. So this is an example of, I have disabilities. I'm using this overlay to show what they try to do for my disabilities makes it actively worse. This is a small example. For screen reader users, the overlays do a horrible job. I was testing this a few days ago. You cannot get to these sub-menus in the main navigation with a screen reader at all. And that's with their screen reader being turned on. The overlay companies say, we're going to make your site accessible. If you install this one line of code, we're going to run JavaScript. It's going to be great. They are awful. Please, whenever you see them, advise against them. And if your company are doing this, just tell them no. And then there's a bunch of other like privacy concerns and like using a private browser. Like if I made all these settings and I go to a fresh private window, none of those settings were preserved. Like getting into a car that has your preset settings, but every time somebody came in and just moved it, you have to start all over from scratch. And if I see an overlay on a website, that generally is a huge warning sign of, if you put that there, that means you have accessibility problems that you are not fixing. So using hover text, for example, hover text is one of my favorite things. And I am trying to use hover text on this menu and nothing's coming up. I use hover text when I'm testing as a like canary in coal mine. If something isn't working for hover text, it's most likely going to cause problems for other forms of assistive technology. In this case, they already hid the entire submenu, so no assistive technology can access that. But sometimes if things can work for voiceover and not hover text, then we have found that that will introduce problems for voice control and switch control because they will rely on similar mechanisms to hover text. And so that's also
Just as a hint, Kirsten's not the only one that when she sees that
yes.
overlay on the website, she knows the website has accessibility problems. There are a fair number of law firms that have learned that trick too. And so of late, accessibility overlays have become less of an insurance against lawsuits and actually more of an exposure to lawsuits.
Speaking of, there's a nice little overlay fact sheet here that explains the problems with them. And if I scroll down to the bottom and people's personal experiences, they are signed by many of us in the accessibility industry. So many, I think it's like 900 at this point. I haven't put my name on here because I haven't figured it out yet, but which one did I sign? 886 people so far. Will be 887. Yeah, don't use overlays. Don't let your friends use overlays. And another thing I wanted to showcase with this slide is there's more than just screen readers. So I showed some voiceover just to say, hey, this is how people navigate. But there's a lot more assistive technology than screen readers. And just because it works with the screen reader doesn't mean it will work for everyone. And overlays are using AI to try and fix the websites. It's not going well. Currently, we still need accessibility experts. We still need manual testing to create accessible websites. And I have here a list of some of my favorite resources. Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit is it's awesome. It's kind of a fun read. The Web Accessibility Initiative website, WAI, has a lot of resources. The WCAG 2.2 Understanding Doc. So this is when you're trying to figure out what exactly the success criteria you're looking at means. The ARIA Authoring Practices Guide. So I look at this all the time for combo boxes because those are tricky to implement. And MDN is also a great place to look at the specific HTML elements you're using and what roles and values are allowed and the expected accessibility behavior. I also have a link to the overlay fact sheet, and Scribely is an alt text consulting company, and they have a master class. So they've got like 3 blog posts about how to write quality alt text, and it's very good. And lastly, get involved. So if you would like to dig into accessibility, a great opportunity that signups have just opened. We have some folks in the room that have done this. The Nobility Accessibility Internet Rally, or AIR. You create teams of developers. You're paired with an accessibility mentor and a design mentor, and you create an accessible website for a nonprofit, and then you are judged. You have several months to do this. I served as a judge last year, and there's an web accessibility Slack. If you just want to talk to other people about accessibility or if you have questions. I mentioned at the beginning, I have a accessibility certification. If you're curious about that, there's the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. It was nice. I have it because my company had paid for it. I probably wouldn't pay for it myself, but there's a core competencies and accessibility certification that's just, hey, I've taken the time to learn about accessibility and I know my basics. That would be appealing. For design practice, there's a Figma community file kit to practice annotations. And then local volunteering. San Antonio Lighthouse for the Blind has been renamed as Vibrant Works, but they do Easter egg beeping hunts. I believe there's a Halloween event. They've got an upcoming golf tournament, I think in September. Guide Dogs of Texas is based out of San Antonio. They do events, puppy raiser or help like babysit for the puppy raisers when they want to break. And in Austin, we have TSBVI, the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and Texas School for the Deaf, TSD. I volunteered at TSBVI before, just doing events with the kids, and I started a coding club there. I'm doing Power of Code with them. There's also Disability SA. I don't know anything about it, so I left it as a question mark. I tried to look into it, couldn't find much info, but I have it linked in. And there's a documentary on Netflix I recommend called Crip Camp, and it was fascinating. It went over some of the history of the Rehab Act and ADA getting implemented. I learned a lot. Yes, and please ask me anything afterwards. Love to go over any website design questions you have, accessibility things.